Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Martin Lycka's in my Safe Bet show. And I have the utmost pleasure and privilege to have Mr. Paul Buck on the show with me today. Paul and I have been, for the record, friends for quite some time. We've launched a number of projects together, so we will of course come on to that. But even more importantly, for those unlucky few who wouldn't have come across Paul just yet, he's the CEO and founder of an epic organization called Epic Risk Management. So welcome on the show, Paul. Great to have you.
Thank you, Martin. Absolute pleasure to be here. As I said, we've known each other a while now, so it'd be good to sort of share some of those experiences in the next half hour or so, I guess.
Then that's much appreciated. Paul, and I will of course let him talk to it, has a very powerful life story. So I will delve right into it and address the proverbial elephant in the room. How does a nationwide top 1% bank manager, i.e. Mr. Paul Buck, end up in Her Majesty's Prison Kirkham?
Yeah, it's probably a very long story, Martin, but we could probably spend more than half an hour on just talking about that. But in short, between 2001 and 2011, I was a financial advisor and then a regional manager and divisional manager for Santander, so Europe's largest bank. Whilst at the same time sort of suffering what we class as a pathological gambling disorder or a gambling addiction in simpler terms. And during that decade, I transacted nearly £5 million across 93 different betting accounts, lost £1.3 million, of which unfortunately nearly £500,000 of that was the bank's, not mine. So the level of addiction had sort of taken to a level where I started taking money from the bank that worked for me. So I think it shows the powerful nature of a gambling addiction for that, small percentage, but significant number of people who do have problems with gambling. I was definitely one of them during that decade. And after handing myself in after a couple of quite major rock bottoms, I ended up being sentenced to 2 years, 8 months in prison back in 2011. So just around 10 years ago now. And yeah, that was kind of a very short version of the reason I ended up in HMP Kirkham.
These stories are, as I've said, both powerful, impressive, but also paint a picture that the gambling addiction is a very, very slippery slope. So right off the bird go, let me thank you for all the work that you've been doing and what Epic Risk Management has been doing, if I may, most definitely on my own behalf, but also on behalf of the whole industry, because the industry does need people like you, and we do need people like your team. The move from Kirkham to Epic Risk Management arguably is one of, if not the leading problem gambling consultancy in the world. So do you mind telling us how it all started? What was the initial objective? And then we'll move on to talking about what happened next.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I suppose it goes back to the same place. You're kind of away from your family and friends. Your career's over. You've no money left, sort of thing. And you sat there in a prison library teaching armed robbers to read and such things. And you really got a decision to make, a life decision to make around what do you do next. And the thing that struck me back in 2012, in particular, and going into 2013, was that, really, for those people who were suffering with a problem, there really wasn't anything available to them until they'd actually, fallen off the edge of a cliff very crudely. They got the addiction, they were suffering from the addiction and all the consequences that come with that. There was really nobody doing anything to try and stop that happening in the first place and trying to stop people getting to the edge of that cliff in the first place. And that's really what I made a decision to do quite quickly. After those rock bottoms and whilst in prison, really. And really, it was go out there and try and stop people going down the same path that I did. And that really is true to this day. We're not treatment providers. We don't claim to be something that we're not. We are there as a company, and there's 17 people now in our company. Well, it's 43 in the company, but there's 17 of us who've really suffered quite serious gambling addictions. And the aim hasn't changed from day one, really, and that is to stop people going down the same paths that we did and working collaboratively in the sectors where most harm exists, statistically and evidentially, where we can go and make most impact, and how we can prevent the most harm. So really it came from that life decision of where do you go next after being convicted of fraud in many ways.
How did you get to meet the guys that form your team these days? Because as we both already said, it's by no means easy to come out with a life story that, at least to some extent, revolves around gambling addiction. So I suppose you wouldn't be walking down the road of your hometown, picking people off the street, come and work for me. So how did you manage to, or how did you pull that off?
It's been a really interesting journey for that. As I said, until Epic came along, there really wasn't any lived experience-led organisations as such, certainly not working in the prevention space. And it's really happened like a snowball effect, really. I guess I was the first person who came out and sort of started telling my story. We then started working with some quite high-profile companies and organisations in the sectors that we work. And really, by getting my story out there, and then we had a professional rugby player, a guy called Mark Potter, who came on board, and an ex-teacher and international cricketer or professional cricketer, Patrick Foster, came along, and Scott Davis, an ex-footballer. So as we started telling our stories and we started getting it out there more in the open, I think two things happened really. One is that stigma started to go, and there is a huge stigma attached to gambling addiction. These days, really pretty much all around the world, men in particular, I think, are more comfortable now talking about depression and anxiety and other mental health problems. But there is still a huge stigma attached to gambling addiction. It's seen as a weakness. It's seen as, most people can stay in control. Why can't I? And that kind of stops people coming out and telling the story. So the fact that the 4 or 5 of us originally were out there and doing that in quite high profile places like the English Football League and Chelsea and others like that, it encouraged other people to come out and start talking about it. And that's a really healthy thing to happen. If people get treated earlier or recognise they have a problem earlier, the better. And secondly, what it did, it gave people a platform to come forward and say, look, I've had this problem, or I've got this problem. And in the first instance, you can signpost them to the right treatment and the right intervention if that's still needed. Or in certain circumstances, and as I said, there's 17 of us now, it gives people that platform to tell their story, to go and create some impact of their own under the Epic banner. And really, for a lot of people, that's a route that they want to go when you've suffered the real hard end of this addiction. It's something where you feel like you want to make a difference to the world afterwards. I think that certainly happened with me 10 years ago, and it continues to happen with the people who continue to join Epic, both in the UK, America, interest in Australia, Canada, and all these different places now. So hopefully the more people who can do it and talk about this and have the bravery to do it, then the better.
My next question is going to be, where's Epic at as we speak? So feel free to promote the organization, call out some highlights.
Yeah, well, as I said, Epic's mission has always been using lived experience to take the problem out of gambling. We're purely around prevention, and we started very much as a one-man band, which soon became a 2 and 3 and 4-man band. We'd always made the commitment we were going to work in the highest risk sectors, and for us at the time that was elite sport. I don't think there's any secret that there's a connection between sport and gambling. It was financial services. So again, if you look at it statistically, the most harm of any sector anywhere in the world in almost all countries is in financial services, with risk takers like financial advisors, which I used to be, hedge funds, fund managers, that kind of thing. We worked in some of the toughest prisons, so we know there's a big problem in prisons with gambling. It's one of the fastest growing reasons that people are actually going to prison. The armed forces, and also kids. So kids get educated on, sex, drugs, alcohol, body image, stranger danger, and so on. But there isn't really anything formally in almost any country is any education around gambling. And, again, it's not an anti-gambling message. It's not a gambling is bad message, but there is a significant number of people who suffer harm with it eventually. It's a fact. So to go in and actually educate children in a more educated and impactful way prevents harm further on down the line. So they were always the 5 sectors, and we've stuck to those sectors. And the only one we've added really is by working with some partners within the gambling industry. We don't work with everyone. We only work with those who genuinely prove to us and show that they want to make a difference and make it a more sustainable industry and a safer industry. And to do that, we very much believe in a collaborative approach. And we do a lot of training now for gambling operator staff. We work with boards, as you said, we were with your board of Entain yesterday. And we try and sort of influence safer gambling to be higher on the agenda across the board, really, in all of those sectors, including the gambling industry, and very much having that collaborative effect. So, we've risen to 43 people. We've worked in 27 countries now, which is pretty incredible when you say that from a one-man band and where it came from. And obviously, the main focus of our work so far has been in the UK, which is going through an interesting time at the moment. More and more so in the US, as you know, as again, going through an interesting time in a different way at the moment with the opening up of sports betting in states. And different places around the world in Europe, like Malta, Gibraltar, and Australia, and places like that as well. So, it's growing fast. I'd be quite happy if I could close Epic tomorrow if it meant that gambling wasn't a problem for people anymore. But the truth is that it always will be, the same as any industry like this. And we continue to grow. And I think it's that collaborative, authentic approach that is allowing that growth and asking more and encouraging more and more people to work with us.
You've already alluded to numerous organizations, once again, all around the world that you've worked with. Football clubs in the UK, college professional sports, something we've worked on together in the US, Belgian football, and so on and so forth, all these 27 countries. And I indeed could go on, but if you were to pick, with all due respect to all the other partners, 3 partners that are the closest to your heart, and explain why that is the case, would you mind?
We take all of our relationships seriously, but I suppose the 3 that come to mind, if you're looking at it from a sports angle or a sport athlete education angle, would really be the very first one we got. So the break that we got was with the Rugby Players Association in the UK. That was in 2016, and that was to go around and educate all the professional rugby players in the UK. So in the likes of Harlequins and Saracens and Newcastle and Sale Shark, and even England Sevens and England Women, to go around and kind of tell a story and just educate people on what can happen with gambling if it gets out of control, and how it can have an effect on their career and also their sort of livelihoods, if you like. So we continue to have that relationship at the moment with the Rugby Players Association. We've just signed another 4-year contract with them as well. So I think that will always be special, because it was the one that really gave that first platform to Epic to work in this space and where everything else came from. I think the second one would probably be a program we're doing with the English Football League in the UK. So we work with all 72 clubs of the EFL, which is the 3 divisions below the Premier League, as you know, and we work with them, every club, all every year. So it's 72 visits every year. And I think that has been pretty groundbreaking. We started that in 2018 as part of the sponsorship deal that they have. We've worked with first teams, we've worked with academy players, which is almost more important, because these are the young people, 18 to 23-year-old, who are going into a professional environment, suddenly earning a lot of money in some cases, having everything done for them, and they're also very competitive, prone to injury and that kind of thing. So a lot of the triggers that we know are there for gambling addiction are there. But from the evaluation, we can see that kind of education is working with the EFL. You can see a reducing amount of players each year who are maybe gambling problematically. We're seeing people present for treatment quicker, which is better, because the quicker that you recognise you have a problem and get help, it's usually less harm involved. So I think that programme is pretty revolutionary, and still to this point, probably the largest done in world sport. And I think the third one is really probably the college athletes that we work with in the US. As you know, we've been working with Entain's Foundation previous years around college athletes, and going in and working with the college athletes there. So, and then, towards the end of last year, we've agreed a deal directly with the NCAA, so the National College Athletes Association, which is basically 500,000 student athletes at any one time. And it's around 1,200 colleges in the US. And again, these are your sports athletes. These are your NFL stars of tomorrow. These are your MLB stars of tomorrow. These are your Olympic athletes of tomorrow at places like Ohio State, Michigan State, Clemson, places like that. So in terms of stature of program and importance of program, I would say that NCAA one is absolutely right up there as well, with the potential to reach 500,000 student athletes every year, and on a recurring basis, as obviously people come in and leave. I think the other importance with that is these guys in America, obviously, and girls, they're not really old enough to gamble yet either. With 21 being the age, a lot of these are 18, 19, 20. So to get that prevention and precautionary message in early is even more important as they go off into their sort of competitive sports careers in many instances. It's an important audience to hit. So, it was a very unfair question, Martin, as you said, but really, if I was going to go for three, it would be probably the RPA, the Rugby Players Association, the EFL, and the NCAA. But there's some really exciting ones in the offing as well with different sports around the world as well. So ask me again in 12 months and we'll see if they're still the same.
And we've already touched upon the ongoing review of the 2005 UK Gambling Act. And I reckon I would be definitely remiss in my duties to the industry if I didn't ask you about your views on that process, because of course, and for good reason, you have been very heavily involved with it. So in a nutshell, where do you think the process is currently headed? And what, in your view, will the industry look like at the other side of it?
Okay, so it's another really good question, which could be quite a detailed answer if we had longer. But I think the first thing I would say is it's probably long overdue. I was a heavily addicted gambler when the last one was written. And came into act, sort of between 2003 and 2005. And, gambling in those days was a very different beast to what it is now. It was mainly in betting shops. There wasn't the constant online in play, or all the different elements, the slots, etc., that there are now. So I think the first thing to say is it's definitely long overdue. We need to bring the Gambling Act into the digital age. Which has been a common thread. I think the other interesting element with it is the way that the kind of review has happened. We're still waiting, as we record now, we're still waiting for the white paper to come out, even though it's been promised for maybe half a year ago or even longer. And I think that shows the complexity of it, because I don't think there is a one size fits all. Some of the very common themes in there have been around football shirt sponsorships. And I would be in favour of football shirt sponsorships probably not being there, because heroes wearing the same thing as kids. Kids should be able to wear shirts that the heroes wear that they watch. So I would agree with that, but I don't think it's a magic bullet. I think it's important, but I don't think it's a magic bullet. And I'm not sure there is one silver bullet that is going to solve problem gambling or make gambling safer for all. It's a combination of things ranging from affordability. So how do we make sure that people aren't spending any money that they can't afford to lose? How do we make sure they're not spending any time that they can't afford to lose? How do we make sure it's not taking over their kind of cognition or brain space and they lose any sort of mental health side of it that they can't afford to lose, obviously. So I think it's incredibly complex. And I think the reason it's taken that long is that so many people have had so many different opinions. The industry have obviously got one opinion, that the rate of gambling is going down, that they're doing more and more than they've ever done before to stop problem gambling and increase safer gambling. You've obviously got a very vocal and educated set of people on the other side, from medical people to gambling campaigners to people with lived experience. So you've got people right at the other end who believe in much firmer measures are needed and actually, doubt some of the figures that are out there, that gambling's coming down and so on. And it's become quite polarized. And I think that's another reason that I think that the white paper is taking so long, because there's such differential in views and not that much collaboration or collaborative talks between the two. So I think it's very complicated. Even when the white paper comes out, I think it will probably be a position where nobody's still happy. I think the industry will probably think it's gone too far. I think the campaigners and people at the other end of the spectrum will think it's not gone far enough. And reality, it's going to be something that I think doesn't please anyone in the end. And that's a sad nature, but it is incredibly complex. If it was easy, I think it would have been kind of done and dusted by now. So it's going to be really interesting to see how far it goes. But I think, ultimately, as I said before, there'll always be some level of harm from gambling. And I think that's why that collaborative nature is the way that it should be, that everyone should have some collective responsibility to try and combat that.
Thank you for the very thorough and spot-on answer. In my view, it's very clear that if Paul went running Epic Risk Management, he could be a diplomat and be with the Foreign Office. Talking about foreign lands, let's move on to talk a little bit about what's shaping up to be the new promised land, if you will, of sports betting, namely America. And by that, I mean both the United States and the likes of Ontario. I'm sure my friends in Ontario would be rather displeased with me because of having lumped them together with their southern neighbours, but I shall digress. But as you've just explained yourself, you've clearly been with the UK industry through its thick and thin, and let's see how it pans out going forward. But through these particular lenses, what is your stance on the US sports betting bonanza of late? It would appear, and once again, this may be a loaded question, have you seen responsible gambling gaining more and more prominence throughout the industry? And if that's the case, how does this trend manifest itself to you?
So it's a really interesting point. I often get asked when I doing interviews or panels or media, what is it that keeps you awake at night? And it always used to be sort of a UK related answer, or it used to be an Epic related answer. And I think the honest answer to you now is the thing that keeps me awake at night at the moment is the position in the US. We're doing more and more work over there with different audiences, from college athletes to Major League Sport to a number of different industries. And what I see worries me in a few ways, really, because at the moment it's growing fast. As you said, the number of states who are legalizing for sports betting is increasing dramatically. There doesn't feel like there's anything like enough provision being put in place for research, education and treatment. Some of these states haven't even got a gambling fund or a problem gambling fund. And if they have, it's not distributed as efficiently as it may do. There doesn't feel like there's a great treatment network. I know there's some organisations out there who are trying to fix that and so on, but for the amount of people who are going to suffer issues with gambling, there probably isn't a treatment network that's safe, that's fit for purpose. There's very little education out there. I know there's efforts being made by different councils, and Epic's certainly going to do its bit in the highest risk sectors like we have in the UK and around the world, but there doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of education and awareness going on beyond a very small pool of organisations. And research, that's probably one area where there is quite a bit of research going on with some prominent researchers over there, including at Harvard and UNLV and others. But it does feel that the industry is growing a lot faster than safer gambling or sustainable gambling efforts are. And there is some exceptions to that. I know your very own foundation is doing an awful lot and leading the way on that, and some of that's with us. But there doesn't feel that there is the same growth in safer gambling or sustainable gambling player protection efforts as there is in the actual industry itself. And the worry with that is that it maybe goes along the same path as maybe the UK have. We've just talked about the UK, where self-regulation was attempted and has been attempted for over a decade. It's maybe not worked to the extent it should have done. If the truth be told, I think it's better now than it was, but maybe in previous years it hasn't, and that's how it's now got to a stage where politicians will make the decision and not the industry themselves are kind of having some of that taken away from them. And I think for the US, they've got an opportunity at the moment to be the largest and most successful gambling industry in the world, but also the safest. And what I'm not seeing at the moment is that safest bit. There are some efforts from some operators and there's some good people in the space. But overall, I think the gambling industry is growing far faster than any kind of safer gambling efforts are. And that's my big worry. Does America waste the opportunity that it's got to be the market leader and to have the most successful gambling industry in the world, but also the safest? Because all I'm seeing now is risk-free bets, VIP clubs, all this kind of thing, which we've seen before in other jurisdictions. And I think America, in all honesty, is in danger of killing the goose that lays the golden egg. If it doesn't take sustainable gambling seriously, and it doesn't protect its players, and it doesn't moderate its adverts and free bet offers or risk-free bet offers and things like that, eventually public opinion will turn, eventually politicians will get involved, and eventually, the regulation will come at a much greater amount than it would be if you did the right things properly now. So that would be my worry right now. There's going to be an awful lot of harm in America if the direction of travel doesn't change, and these kind of player protection efforts, harm prevention efforts don't increase.
And indeed, Paul and I, and a growing few, I would say, number of others have been on this journey, embarked on the journey to try to change all that, and if that's possible, help America help itself. Talking about, and let me move on before giving Paul the usual 60 seconds I give my guests to wrap it all up. You're a borderline, well, scratch the borderline, you're a fanatical Dallas Cowboys fan. So do you believe that, as you told me, just like you at Phil Thompson's charity golf tournament, Duck and Zeke can finally get lucky and score their hole-in-one this season?
I as you know, Martin, I thought the Cowboys would win it last year, and I was sadly wrong. We came grinding to a halt to the 49ers very early on in the playoffs, and I'm blindly loyal to the teams that I support across the board, really. I'll always be a Cowboys fan, I think, and hopefully start working with them this year in one way or another, in a different way. But will they win the Super Bowl this year? I'm less confident than I was last year, but I think we'll win our division. Dare I say, considering some of your previous guests on here, I think we'll be the strongest in our division. But will we actually win the Super Bowl? I'm not sure. I've got a horrible feeling we'll get to the playoffs and get knocked out by one too strong quite quickly in that process, unfortunately.
In a similar vein, if that's even possible, your passion for one of the two invincible teams of English football, namely Preston North End, bit of a distant memory, but yeah, they're one of the two invincibles, very likely even beats your Cowboys-related madness. So do you reckon we shall see PNE in the Premier League anytime soon?
Well, I'm probably thinking that a lot of people who are listening to this probably don't even know who Preston North End are, but you're quite right. They were the original Invincibles. Everyone talks about Arsenal and the famous team more recently who were the Invincibles, but Preston were the original Invincibles in 1888. 1881. And it's probably the last time we had a decent team, to be fair. But we hover around the Championship, which is the league below the Premier League. Obviously, we're usually somewhere between 10th and 12th, something like that. We've not really threatened the Premier League since for about 10 years when we lost to West Ham in the final at that point. We have got a promising young manager. We are spending some decent money for a change, I think. Whether we'll be good enough to get in the Premier League, maybe not this year. They may surprise me, but certainly in the next 5. As I said, I'm blindly optimistic, and hopefully in the next 5 we might be able to trouble it and get up there with the big boys and see if we can stay there.
Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time for Paul to shine even more. 60 seconds to convey his key messages, please. The stage is yours.
I suppose what I would say is that most people, let's not forget, most people can gamble and can stay in control of time, money, cognition. So the 3 elements of gambling, I think. However, a small percentage but significant number of people cannot, and it can obviously lead to devastating consequences. So my urge really within this 60 seconds was in the UK, let's get the Gambling Act right. Let's make it realistic. Let's make sure those who want to gamble and can stay in control can. For those who can't, let's make sure the right protective measures are there. In the US, let's make sure that safer gambling, sustainable gambling, responsible gambling, it grows just as fast as the industry so that we prevent some of the harms that we've seen in other places and attract people to a regulated market rather than the black market, if you like. And I think for me, it's all about collaboration. Everybody's got their part to play in that, from regulators to politicians, to media, to organisations like Epic and others who work in this space. And also the individual themselves, making use of tools that are available to them. And I think for me, that's the only way really that gambling can remain sustainable, both now and in the future.
Very wise words as always. Thank you very much for coming on to the show, Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the privilege and pleasure of having Paul back on what is, I'm told, the 14th episode of the Safe Bet Show. So thank you very much. My name is Martin Lycka. I'm hosting it. I will go on hosting it, and I look forward to seeing you here very, very soon. Take care.